So I want to do a few more upgrades to Ender-3 Pro here. So let's start with the first one, which is this hot end cover. It's like a silicone cover for the hot end. So I got this straight from Creality official. Actually, I got this on Amazon, but it is the official. So essentially it's just a little heat cap, I guess, that goes on the bottom here. And these are a reasonably good deal. I think they're under $10 or around there somewhere. And it comes with 3 of them, which I already have 2 Creality printers, so I could use 2 of them. So there's just these 2 little screws here that we're going to need to take out. So here we can see the assembly a lot easier. So here we have the heat break where the filament comes in and stays cool, and then as it gets down to the block here where it heats up, this is where we have a little sock here, or whatever you call this, insulation. Now I'm not sure if this rubber one just goes on top of this or you got to take that off. I'm not sure. Let's go ahead and try to put it on there. So the bigger opening here goes where the wires come in. So it should just slide over. Yeah, it looks like that's definitely not supposed to go on with the insulation. So I guess we're going to need to cut all this away. Alright, so I just snipped the tape from here to here. And now it looks like it's just coming off easily. Actually, that is very thin. Appears to be another piece on there still. And that looks like it's already kind of been overheated. Alright, let's see if we can slide our new piece on. Now it definitely has a much better, actually a perfect fit. So hopefully you guys can see that. Pretty nice little silicone sock. So I can definitely tell that this goes down quite a bit lower here. You know, and that should prevent the filament stringing up and sticking to the top here. So. Alright, so that was a very easy upgrade. So now we're just going to put this back, put those 2 bolts back in, and we're done. And hopefully that'll give us a little better thermal insulation there with that. Alright, so the next thing we're going to be upgrading is this whole assembly here. So I don't really like the way this just doesn't feel good for some reason, and it seems to bind a little or something. And because it's made out of plastic, it just seems like it's not as sturdy like this would be. So this is an official kit here from Creality. Let's take a look at it here. It comes with quite a few pieces, and it is all metal, which looks to be aluminum. And also the coupler here has a thread on there. Just seems to be a much better quality overall. And look at that, they even gave us a little nozzle here. I don't even know what size that is, but I'm guessing that's a 0.4. Here we have the teeth gear that pushes against the filament. The spring looks a little different. It's more shiny than the one that I got on here right now. And what's cool is they give me another coupler, so I'm actually going to try this and see if it's better and if it'll hold my tube. And here's the hardware here. So let's go ahead and take this one off. So I got a little clip on here, which I 3D printed, and that just separates this piece here so the tube doesn't move as much. So now all we got to do is just take off these Allen bolts there. And I think we need to take this handle off first also, because there's another bolt hiding right there underneath. So I'm going to go ahead and take the arm off first. Alright, so that was easy enough. So once you loosen those 3 bolts, the whole motor actually is loose. So we can see that right there. And then this thing should just slide right off. And here we can compare it to the new one. So the first thing I'm noticing is that the new one does not have this little cable bracket clip on the side there. We do have a custom made one right here where the filament guide is. So that's not a big deal. And the rest looks to be about the same. So this new piece will just go right on top of here, same way, and then we're going to bring the motor up. So I got those 3 started. Now we can go ahead and tighten them. So kind of the strange thing is that on the older one here, the plastic one, you can see that there's a little nub here. The new one doesn't have that. Same thing over here. So it just has a hole with a thread in it. And I guess what they want you to do, because you got 2 extra bolts here, is use the bolt as the little nub to hold the spring in place. So I guess we just need to start our bolt into there and into here. I'm thinking this one maybe needs to go the other way, maybe through here. That way I can tighten it and it's not going to be wobbling around. So I screwed this one in until it got tight. Alright, so the next step is we're going to put the little spacer in here and then the long bolt. And that should line up very well just right there. But we got to not forget our spring, obviously. Here's the new spring. It's a little bit more shiny than the old one. So I guess we'll go ahead and use the new one. And it's actually bigger too, you can see. Hopefully this won't be too hard. Alright, so I went ahead and threaded the bolt down and got this pretty straight here. I'm going to go ahead and tighten this a little bit, not too hard. Man, that feels really good. It feels strong, but it's very like smooth. You can tell it's pushing really good that way. Way better than the original one. So it's possible that the spring can move around. Let's see, I can show you guys. You can see there. It can move around up and down and everywhere, but it's not going to fall out, obviously. Just line it up pretty straight and leave it like that. It should be fine. Alright, so for the last part, let's put this coupling on. And it feels so good that, you know, all this is going to metal threads, metal to metal here. So now we should be able to put our tube in. So I'm going to go ahead and put this little spacer back in that I printed out. Alright, and that went in very well. Definitely turned out a lot better than I thought it was going to be. And it definitely feels a lot better too. Anytime you got, you know, pressure involved with a pretty strong spring, plastic just doesn't do the job as good. So this is a great upgrade. So I can go ahead and put my knob back on. And we're good to go. Alright, so the next upgrade leads us to these benchy here that I printed. So this is the very first benchy that I printed on this printer. So as you can see, it does not look all that great. And there's only 2 walls on the outer shell. So the overhangs are actually very reasonable. And everything else looks great. Like the structure is very good, but the details are just not there. I don't know if you can see this, but on the side here, you can see there's artifacts, and I think that's what they call Salem skin. It's basically vibrations from the printer going into the print, like stepper motor vibrations, and you could probably tell pretty easily there how bad that looks. And that's one of the reasons I printed this in black, is so we can see a lot better of what's going on. Alright, so the idea here is to install TL smoothers. So these are diodes that let current flow only in one direction, and here you can see the diodes. And I've actually printed out these little holders for mine. They're custom made because the ones I bought were, you know, looked a little different here. You can see they're more square. But the idea here is that whenever power flows this way, it can flow, but it cannot flow backwards. Same thing on this side. Whenever power flows this way, it can flow, but it cannot flow backwards. And you can tell by the, well, I don't know if you can tell, but there's like a little lines here. So these diodes are facing that way, and then these 2 center diodes are facing this way. And these 2 are facing that way. So basically these are essentially one-way valves for electricity, and it's for preventing like back spikes from the motor and things like that that will cause, you know, very micro vibrations in the movement of parts whenever the motor is switching directions. I think most of the time is when, you know, you get the biggest spike that you're trying to get rid of, and this should be able to get rid of that. So these are simple as plug and play. So we should just plug these in, and it comes with a little extension here. And if you are going to get some, make sure you get the one that has 8 diodes, because it seems like the 8 diode ones are having a better result. So that's the ones I went with. So alright, so let's install these, and these are very simple to install, and we're going to have to go underneath the machine for this one. Alright, so however you turn your machine upside down, I guess I'm not going to turn it upside down because I still have this shelf here. And what you're going to do is you're going to take off this plate right here. So there's just only 3 little bolts holding this. Well, there's more than 3. There's actually one up here, looks like, that we might have to take off. So yeah, that's definitely it, because it's starting to move now, as you guys can see right there. So this cover comes off easily after that, and here we can see the board, you know, with the drivers here on this side. So we're not going to do the Z. I feel like the Z is not necessary. Even though this came with 3, I'm only going to use 2, and I've only printed 2 of these little holders here. So it looks like these connectors here have some hot glue, so I guess we're gonna have to try to get them out carefully here. But we're just gonna do the X and the Y, because that's where most of our movements come from. The Z only moves a tiny bit as it prints, so that should not, you know, play the effect. Alright, so I just tugged on them a little, and the glue broke loose really easily. It looks like it's just hot glue, so not a big deal. So the idea here is that, you know, this connector here will go in one of the plugs, and then the other one you'll plug in the cable that comes with it, and then this will plug in into the stock connector here, just like that. And everything is labeled, guys, by the way, so you won't get it confused. And so then our original wire will plug into here. Simple as that. Now we're done. So now we just gotta, you know, make sure we put this in somewhere where it's not going to be, you know, touching anything. But I think if I leave it just like that right there. So here's our second one. And these little holders you can find on Thingiverse. And then what I did is just adjusted it to mine where it'll fit perfect. Well, actually almost perfect. What I did was I chopped these guys off just like that. It's still soldered on really good, so it's just this is excess that's sticking out. So now we can go in there perfectly, just like that. Alright, so both of our diodes or TL smoothers, whatever they call them, are in. I guess it is a smoother. So in the back here, it's a smoother. Alright guys, so I got the cover holding with my hand, but one of the TL smoothers ended up being here on higher a little bit. You can see through the grill there, and the other one is way down here. So they should be just fine right there where they are. And we're going to go ahead and put the bolts back on and flip this thing around, and can't wait to see the result. Alright, so our benchy is done and it looks really, really good. Check out those sides, guys. Wow. That is definitely a lot better. Wow, this is a really good benchy here, guys. And at this point, the printer prints great. I mean, it's just an awesome machine. But in this video, I want to make it a little more awesome. And we're going to start with this Bowden tube. So a lot of you guys recommended that I should change this to a higher quality tube. And so I went ahead and bought the Capricorn tubing here. It's supposed to have a little bit better tolerances, heat resistance, especially if you're going to start printing, you know, hotter temperatures. And not only that, it technically grabs better to the couplings here. So I guess the first thing we need to do is release these little clamps here, or should I say zip ties. So now our tubing is completely free. So I'm going to go ahead and take out this little spacer here. By the way, guys, if you have a 3D printer, unless you have upgrade couplings, most couplings that come on 3D printers, or so far that I have experienced, have not been holding the tube in there correctly. So it seems like that this needs to spread here in order for it to grab better. Alright, so what we're going to do is just going to push that in and then pull the tube out, hopefully here. So one of our ends are out. Now we need to go to this end. So unfortunately, I don't think this end is just as easy as pulling it out, but I'm not sure. I think we have to unscrew this nut here on top and then we'll work from there, but I'm not exactly sure. The reason it's a little bit more complicated on this end is because the tubing goes all the way down to the end where it gets really hot down there. So hopefully we'll be able to do this correctly here. So instead of trying to pull it out, I'm just going to go ahead and try to unscrew this nut here carefully. So it seems to go pretty easy overall. So far so good. So for some reason this is not coming out, you know, just by tugging on it. So I don't know if I, you know, could put more pressure on it or not. I don't want to break anything. So I'm going to try to use a little heat to warm it up and see if that will, you know, help us release it. So we're just going to go to prepare and preheat Pla. As it's preheating, I'm just gonna, you know, tug it a little bit, give it a little tug here. Oh, there it goes. All right, well that was easy. All right, so I guess that works. If you can't take it out, warming it up makes it really easy. So let's cool down here. All right, let's see if we can get this clamp off here. Okay, it's moving, but it's having a hard time. I guess it's got a really good grip on this tubing here. There it goes. So this seems like to be a high quality coupler here. It's grabbing on really good. Alright, and here's the Capricorn tubing. They did include a sticker, which is kind of interesting. I guess if you wanted to put that somewhere. But it looks like this comes with 1 meter, which is, I guess, about 3 feet. Technically, this is maybe enough to do a couple of printers. So the first thing I'm noticing here, guys, is that on both ends, the cut is not good. It's crooked. So I'm kind of surprised that Capricorn is not cutting their tubes nicely, because that sure would have helped us with one end. That's very important, because the end that goes in here has to be perfectly flat. If it's on an angle a little bit back or forth, there's a chance that your filament will run underneath the tubing, the hot filament, and then, you know, you can have clogs and whatnot else. So it's very important that the tubing is cut very straight and flat. So I don't have a cutter, but I'm going to use some kind of razor or like a knife to cut it as straight as possible. So all right, and that's what it should look like, kind of. So it has to be really straight and flat. So obviously it's better to get a cutter, but you know, if you don't have one, this works also. All right, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to put the fitting back on, and we're going to screw that down pretty far, but just screw it down with your hand almost to the end, and then kind of leave it a little bit loose just right there. And the reason for that is because we don't want to tighten this until we have our tube all the way down in there. And the reason for that is because we can actually use this to kind of go that tiny little bit and put a little pressure down onto the very bottom to the tip. So that's the idea here. So I'm going to grab my tube. I'm just going to go down in there. And make sure you push that down all the way, guys. Now, I don't know if it's worth heating that up just a little bit to get it all the way down. I'm actually thinking that it is, because that'll give us a better seal. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. Not sure if this will be the most correct way, but I have a feeling that this will be a guarantee that we're going to have a good seal there. Alright, so we heat it up. So let's go ahead and push it in there. So this will ensure that we're going to have a really tight fit there. So now we just need to tighten this. And the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to push down on the tube while tightening this and make sure that we're still good. Alright, and that should do the trick. So that should be really tight in there. We can go ahead and zip tie them on the way, and then we'll cut this end. Alright, so I cooled down the hot end and then turned it off. And also I went ahead and put a couple zip ties in already. So now we just need to cut this end to be the perfect length. And so you can kind of eyeball it. You could measure off of the old one, but I found the old one to be a little bit too long. So there's no reason for it to be that long if it doesn't need to be. Technically, the shorter the better. There's less play in the filament while it's retracting. So I'm just going to estimate it about right here or so. And this side doesn't really have to be as accurate as the other side. So I'm just going to cut it on top of this cap here. That should be good enough. So if it's not completely perfectly flat like the other end, it's not a big deal. Alright, so I cut it reasonably straight. It's not perfect. And that goes in there really good, by the way. So, you know, push that in as good as you can. And we're also going to go ahead and put this little clip in here. That way we can guarantee that there will be no movement here. Cut these guys off. And now we're done. Alright guys, so that went really good. Very happy about that. So we'll give it a little test run here in a little bit after our next upgrade. So if you're thinking about changing to Capricorn tubing, I think you should, especially if you have issues with this area. But I wouldn't say this is a necessary upgrade. I think this is one of those upgrades that if you print a lot, and when I mean a lot, I mean like you're printing 24/7. Alright, so this leads us to our next upgrade, which has to do with the fan. And to be more precise, the fan duct. So I'm the kind of person that doesn't really upgrade this kind of stuff unless it's necessary. But if you look at this fan duct, it's just general airflow on a large area. You know, it's kind of like covering a bunch of area with one fan. So I think an upgrade would definitely help if we can focus the airflow, you know, more into a tip underneath that nozzle right there. And this leads me to this piece right here. So this is the duct for the Ender-3, and this is a modified one of the original. And not only that, this duct works with the silicone sock that we already have installed. And if you look at it up close here, guys, you can see that the air is directed very nicely to the center right underneath the nozzle. So I'm pretty sure you can print this in PLA and it'll be just fine. It's pretty far away from, you know, the heat and all that stuff. So because I had the ability to print in ABS, this is where I utilized it. Stronger and longer lasting part here. So here you can see we have 2 bolts that are holding the duct. So Creality provides the Allen wrenches you need for this size. So we're going to go ahead and unscrew that. And the second one. And now the fan shroud should just pop off. Yep, there it goes. Simple as that. So let's look at these guys together here. So you can see how the air is channeled. So here on the original, it's just, you know, straight down and that's it. Nothing too special. Just kind of shooting that way. And on this upgrade here, we can see that we're channeling the air all to one spot. And kind of, you know, in a pattern where it's all going to end up right underneath the nozzle there. Alright, so let's see how this thing will fit in here. So we should be able to just clip in there. Alright, so it was a little bit of a tight fit, but it goes in there just fine. And there you go, guys. You can see how perfectly that fits. So now we can put our bolts in there. Everything should fit. Alright, so I got the bolts tight. And let's look at this thing a little closer here. Hopefully you guys can see it. Air there goes straight to the nozzle. So that should be perfect, and it's got really good clearance, so that should not be an issue either. Alright, well, I'm pretty excited to try this thing out. So it looks like the Benchy's printing pretty well overall. So it looks like to be an excellent print so far. Alright, so the Benchy's done. So taking it off should be breeze. Of course it is. I still don't get why some people don't like this flexible bed. I think it's awesome. I guess if you're going to do more extreme printing, maybe it's not that awesome. But plus, if you want a really smooth bottom, obviously this won't give it to you either. So I wouldn't really say that it's much better than the one we already have. I can see that the overhangs are a little better, like on the arches over there. Let's look at the front here on the window. On the window does seem a little straighter too. So overall, a solid Benchy. So look at that rear window on the top there. It's almost perfect, but not quite there. So here's the last Benchy that we printed. So this is the original Benchy and this is the new one here. I don't know, guys, to my eye they look extremely similar. So this is the original here and this is the new one right here. But you can tell that our overhangs are definitely better because here's the new one right here, and you can see the top of that window is a little better than the other one. The other one has a little bit of a sag there. So I took some time and looked at these up close one by one, and definitely the one with the fan upgrade does look a little better, but it's ever so slightly. So there's one more thing that I want to do to this printer, and that is stepper dampers. And the reason I want to put the dampers on is because I want to make this machine more quieter, because all that little sound that this motors make, you know, gets kind of annoying after a little while. And the Ender-3 is actually pretty loud when it comes to the stepper motor sounds. So what we're going to do is we're going to try to install these stepper dampers. But we have a pretty big issue. And that issue is our gears here on the motor are actually pressed, I think. So Creality has apparently started pressing these on instead of having the little screw that tightens the gear here to the shaft. Instead, they decided to press it, which is kind of interesting. So let's go ahead and take the Y belt off first, because this would be probably the easier one to work on. And to do that, we need to loosen these 4 bolts. Alright, so the bolts are loose, and this should move forward, and our belt should be pretty loose. So if we go back here, back to the motor, we can take off the belt, just like that. So let's grab a damper here so you can see a little better what's going to basically be the issue here. Is that if you added this damper in between the motor and the bracket here, what's going to happen is it's going to add that much thickness to it. And so when it adds this much thickness to it, this pulley would be offset, so it would need to go out exactly this much here. So normally what you'd be able to do is just unscrew the little screw that goes in the pulley here, and that will loosen it and you can move it around. But these are pressed on there where you can't do that. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to unbolt this thing. Well, actually I'm going to unplug it first. Alright, so the 4 bolts are out, and now the motor should just pop right out. So I'm not sure exactly how hard pressed that is, but I have a feeling that it's pretty hard. And so what I did is I put it like this, and then I take this little extension that I made out of the tools I had, and I put it in there, and then I just hit it with the hammer. And as you can see, guys, that's working pretty well because we've moved about a 1/4 inch or so. You can see because it was flush earlier. Alright guys, so you can see I got it pretty deep. So let's take a damper here, and this should just go right over just like that. And this hole right here is actually the perfect size to fit right on there. So once it goes on there, it's solid, like it doesn't move at all. So now we take the original bolts that were in the motor and we screw them on each side. And we're going to tighten these up all the way, so because it'll be hard to reach this area later. And that's what we have now, the damper on there. So now we can install our motor back into here how it was. Alright guys, so the damper is on and everything's back on, and we can see it all fits pretty well. So the damper should be isolating us completely from this frame. So the motor does have like a little play, as you can see. The only thing that's between the frame here and the motor is that rubber right in the middle. And that's what's going to soak up all that noise, supposedly, from the stepper motors making their stepper motor signature noise. So now all we got to do is put the belt back on. We should be pretty good right there. So now we can move to our x-axis here. So that's going to be a little bit harder because, first of all, we have really long bolts. So our hardware might not be able to work with the new dampers, but we'll figure that out. So let's go ahead and unplug this motor. So the screws are actually behind this sticker here. So we can completely take it off, or we can just peel the edges. I'm just going to go ahead and take it off. So let's go ahead and take these 4 bolts off. But before that, we do need to loosen the belt here. So once the 4 bolts are out, they should just completely come out pretty easily. And you can see that our switch is inside of that little box there. So we're just going to pull the belt off. And so now that this motor is out, we're just going to do what we did to the other motor. Alright guys, so I got the motor all finished. So now all we got to do is just work in reverse order. And then we're going to put that cap over it with 2 bolts. And that's it. So I'm going to tighten up everything, plug the motor in, and we should be done with the dampers. Alright guys, so now everything is done. I put the sticker back on to cover up those holes. So you can see the damper right there. So I'm kind of excited to try this thing out. It's definitely quieter, I can tell. Wow, it's actually a lot quieter. I can actually hear the extruder. Wow, that is crazy guys. That's a huge difference. I don't know if you guys can hear it. I'm going to bring the microphone. That's actually very quiet. That really made a huge difference. So it still has that wee 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 sound, but it's very, very, very faint. So I'll play a clip where the original sound is and with this one, so you should be able to tell the difference there. I actually had another idea. I cut up some foam pads that I got from packaging, kind of like feet, and they're pretty squishy. And I was thinking about putting it underneath the printer because I know that the vibrations go down into the table, and that makes the table make sounds also. This printer does have pretty good squishy feet, but I think this will give it even more quietness. So let's try it out for fun. So I'm just gonna lift it up as it's printing here. And I can tell already that that is much quieter. Just like on 2 feet, it's much quieter. Let me go ahead and put the rear ones on. And so now it's literally silent, almost. I'm gonna bring the microphone to it. That's crazy. It's super silent. It's probably even half or more as silent more with these little pads here. So that's a pretty good hack right there. So maybe it'll be worth investigating something similar to this that maybe looks a little better. I know they have a print for the bottom of the feet, so maybe I'll try that one day. But yeah, if you got packing material laying around, try it out. I think it'll surprise you. All right, so our benchy is done. Let's take a closer look at it. So if we look at it here pretty close, we can see that it is still an excellent print. So I don't think those dampers affected the print at all in any way. And we can see our overhangs are still really good. Maybe the best they've been so far. So overall, it seems like a really good print, and actually an excellent print. So here's our first benchy that we printed, and you can see they look identical, or very close to identical. So overall, I would say that the dampers didn't really hinder the quality.